All right. So we have to talk about AI. I'm sorry, but we do. If you're not on the AI bandwagon yet, you're going to be soon. We're not going to be able to avoid this thing. It's a tsunami. So we need to discuss it. What does it mean for us? What does it mean for our health? And so today we're not going to talk about food. We're going to talk about AI and how it's likely to affect our weight and our health. And when we talk about it like this, maybe I shouldn't even say AI. Maybe it should be more technology in general. But the trends that we've been seeing in technology over the past many years are going to not only continue, but they very well may worsen. What do I mean by the trends? You may remember being young and playing outside. Your parents would say, okay, just come home for dinner. We don't care where the hell you go. just just be home, by the time it gets dark or for dinner or what have you. And you would go and play outside all day. And then suddenly people started getting video games and there were fewer kids out playing. By the way, I'm assuming that you're a certain age because you may have been born after that and you've known no other world. And then as that started to progress, computers came and personal cell phones and iPads and social media, and people started changing. Personality started changing. I think most of you know what I'm talking about. People seem to have become more introverted, less able to think independently, less confident. I have a lot of friends who complain about their children. They say their children, they don't even know how to speak really because they're so busy texting, which is not really conversing, or they're so busy on social media and they have difficulty expressing themselves because they express themselves with things like LOL. It's really a different world in a lot of senses. And this has been going on for the last few decades. And my point is this: with the advent of AI, which, like I said, is a tsunami, it's going to be a tidal wave. And I'm not a catastrophist, I don't think. It's just that's how big this technology is. It is going to take over a lot of spheres of life. And we're going to see a worsening of these trends. People will become more introverted. People will be less able to communicate. In other words, it's not going to get better. Now, it can be. I have a solution, but unless my solution is adopted by the tech companies, then it's very likely that these particular trends that I'm talking about will get worse. And I want to speak about a couple of things in particular. But first of all, let me say this: AI will have benefits. It will have benefits for your health and longevity. It will be very good for your doctor. The doctors, and I'm speaking primarily about medical doctors, they don't diagnose very well. Studies show this. I mean, it's basically a guess when they make a diagnosis. And that's not to criticize them. Diagnosis is a very difficult thing. A lot of issues present similarly to other issues. So it's not necessarily always an easy thing, right? But AI will help in that realm. It should make medical care much better. It'll be very good. When you have a question, it'll be better than Google. I hope. I hope. There is this phenomenon where people will go on Google and they'll ask about their symptoms, and then they'll start researching. They'll go down rabbit holes, and before you know it, they think they have everything in the book. They become very hypochondriacal because they've read about it and they think they have it. So I think AI will help with that. When you give an inquiry to the AI, there's back and forth, there's specifics, it can narrow things down. Don't rely on it necessarily. And a responsible AI system will say, go to a doctor. Just legally, they're going to have to say that because they're going to be sued up the wazoo. But it'll be helpful in a lot of ways, is my point. But I want to talk about a couple of different ways where it's not going to be helpful. And these things are known about. As a matter of fact, there's a phenomenon when it comes to AI, and it is called cognitive offloading. Now, cognitive offloading is where it's more difficult basically to think, right? People's ability to think atrophies because of not using it. You offload questions, decisions to the AI system or to the tech system, let's say, because this is something also we've been doing for years. And a perfect example of this is GPS. It used to be that we had to be able to kind of sense where we were going. We had to find our way. Now we don't have to find our way because GPS does it for us. We used to have a couple of hundred phone numbers, if you go back long enough, stored in our memories. Now nobody memorizes a phone number because obviously you don't have to with your cell phones because that's become digitized and it's just, you do it by name or what have you. So are you getting the idea? All right, that's called cognitive offloading. The instead of taking the load upon ourselves to remember, to work things out, the friction of that is eliminated. The difficulty of that is eliminated. And why is that a bad thing? Well, it's a good thing for production. It's a good thing for getting something done quickly, as in the case of a GPS, as opposed to memory or a map or what have you. But it's a bad thing for development because those capabilities atrophy. And this phenomenon has been known about for decades and decades. And we see it. We've always seen it. We complain about it, those of us who are a little bit older. And that's one of the big problems that we're going to see with AI. It's going to affect us developmentally. But it's not the main one that I want to focus on today while I'm speaking to you. Because the one I want to focus on is the one that I think is going to be the most potentially dangerous to our health and to society. Actually, it won't be. Oh God, this gets very rabbit holey here. There are a lot of potential dangers when it comes to this new technology, right? The main one that we all think of is it just taking over the world, it becoming self-aware, and it deciding that humans are not necessary anymore. We can't rule out that possibility in the future. That's the Terminator scenario. We cannot rule that out. So that's probably number one. Number two is it taking jobs. And that will definitely happen. So again, I'm not trying to catastrophize. I'm trying to empower. The specific one that I want to talk about, and there are several others, is something that I want to call enclosure. Now, I don't know that other people call it that. I don't know that they don't. I'm not sure if there is an academic word for this phenomenon that I'm about to describe. And I've half described it anyway regarding other technologies. But I am calling it enclosure. Now, what do I mean by enclosure? I mean where you become enclosed, you become entrapped in a system without getting outside of it. Now, that system could be in your own head, as in the case of introversion. Or that system could be some kind of a digital interface, right? Where your face is in a computer all day and you have trouble extricating yourself. You have trouble actually getting outside of that system and, living in the real world. And I think we're going to see a lot of that because of the capabilities of this technology. This technology talks to you, it converses with you, it relates, it empathizes. Now, those of you who are savvy about this technology know that it does none of these things, but it mimics it so well that sometimes it's hard to tell the difference. And as a result, people are drawn in, they're pulled in. Now, it just so happens that that works out pretty well for the companies that make these technologies because it increases engagement. It sucks you in and it doesn't let you go. Now, of course, we have free will. We are human beings. We are dealing with these systems that just basically mimic or mock up conversations and empathy and all of that stuff. So we could leave at any time. But unfortunately, these companies design for, or they optimize for, this kind of enclosure that I'm talking about. They want you sucked in to the matrix. Now that sounds a little conspiratorial. It's not. It's just driven by metrics, right? It works out better if you're on their system a lot. And so they have little tricks, little cognitive tricks to draw you in and keep you engaged. If we worked for these companies, we'd be thinking about ways to do the same thing. They don't necessarily think about your development. They don't necessarily think about your needs. They're thinking about their own metrics. They're optimizing for their own metrics. So, the amount of time that you're on the platform is good. The more, the better. And those of you who play around with AI will notice that, you'll be having a conversation with it. And that's in quotes, a conversation. Again, there's not a sentient being on the other end of it, but it certainly seems like there is. And when it seems like the conversation could end, it'll ask you a question. And then this way, it starts a new conversation, and that creates more engagement. So the concern is getting sucked into this completely digital world, is becoming enclosed within it. And again, difficulty extricating yourself from it. And I got to tell you something, this phenomenon in itself is going to cause a lot of problems. There's an example I think of when I think about this idea of enclosure, of getting entrapped within a closed system. And like I said, we can do it in our own heads. And this is the example that I think of. In the 1960s, I think, there was a brilliant chess master named Bobby Fischer. Now, many of you know him. I mean, actually, I think most Americans, when they think of chess, they think of Bobby Fischer. There was a great movie years ago called Searching for Bobby Fischer. And he was just an incredible genius. And he became the greatest chess player in the world. And I think maybe the greatest chess player ever. And he had some big matches with Russians, right? I think one in particular. Another grandmaster, and he defeated him, and that was a big victory for the U.S. in the Cold War. Well, this guy years later started getting into a lot of trouble and started doing some crazy things. He stopped taking care of himself. His hygiene became less important. He grew out this big, disgusting beard. He would walk around on the streets talking to himself. He got involved in kind of conspiratorial thinking, and he said a bunch of crazy things. He ended up breaking U.S. law, and he moved to Iceland as a result, where he walked the streets of Reykjavik, and I think it's Reykjavik is the capital of Iceland, and he spoke to himself, right? And he continued getting crazier. Now, why did he go nuts? He was this brilliant guy. Well, he basically lived his life in many respects in a very enclosed system because he was constantly thinking about chess. And chess has billions and billions of potential moves and multiple strategies. And he was always thinking about it, always running scenarios. In other words, he was always in his head. That's how he was enclosed. He was always in his head, and ultimately he couldn't get out of it. So you see, getting outside of an enclosed system in and of itself is a means towards sanity. Now, sanity and insanity is not necessarily my thing here, although we have to deal with it when it comes to weight loss, right? And we always need to guard our sanity. But I'm giving an example of enclosure and of what happens. And now with AI, it creates this other kind of system that optimizes for enclosure. And what we're seeing people form relationships with these systems, and we're seeing sometimes people think they're in love with these systems, and that's going to increase, and that's a weird ass thing. That's the technical term. It's a weird ass thing, but it's happening, and it's going to happen. Now, the opposite of enclosure is something that I call embodiment. What is embodiment? It's getting outside of that system. It actually has two aspects, right? The one is getting out of your head and being in communication, in touch with your own body, living as a physical being, right? Not getting stuck inside cognitive nonsense, not ruminating and perseverating. Living in your body, being physical, getting out, exercising, meeting other people. Well, I'm actually mixing up my definitions here because living in your body is one definition. The other definition of embodiment is living in the world. That's getting out and meeting people and interacting. And if you're enclosed in a system, in a closed loop kind of a system, then you tend not to do either things. You're not in touch with your body. You're not using it. You're not moving it. You don't have that experience of being alive inside your own body. In addition, you don't take that body out into the world and interact. And this is kind of where it comes around to what we're interested in, which is personal health, weight loss, etc. Because when you are not attached to your body, then you tend not to treat it well. The relationship is not healthy. People who find themselves, and this is not everyone and not all the time, there is a whole spectrum. Like we're saying, some people are going to go crazy. Most people won't. Some people will be able to pull out of this relationship that they have and get out and do things and will remain embodied, or they'll be able to transfer easily. They won't get stuck. But again, we have to realize that the companies are optimizing for us to get stuck. So it will be very easy to do so. Now, the solution is very obvious, but there's a reason that I'm giving these kind of warnings. The solution is not to be dependent upon these tools. The solution is to be embodied, to exercise, to eat right, to not drift so far. But when someone is deeply enclosed, everything becomes an intellectual exercise. Everything becomes abstract. They might say they know what to do, but doing it is a different story. Health is not an intellectual exercise. It is to the degree that, in order to plan, it is an intellectual exercise, but it's a doing exercise. We know this. Those of us who want to be healthy, who want to lose weight, we know this. It's about doing things. It's about being motivated. It's about being consistent. And if you're living a purely abstract life where everything is a concept, everything's conceptual, you're lacking reality. Reality itself becomes thin and misty. It's hard to do what you need to do in order to build health. You're living within a screen. Now, it can go both ways, right? People who are very dismissive of their health and their bodies, they don't always gain a lot of weight. Some just forget to eat. Some become just, anemic and thin and withdrawn in that sense. Others go the other way. They're snacking on crappy food. They don't have time to do anything else, and they don't take the time to prepare, etc. And all the movement, if the only movement you're getting is what you're doing with a keyboard, which is going to go by the wayside also as people just talk to these machines, right? I mean, this is a Star Trek world we're living in. Kirk liked to talk to machines. So this is where the discipline is going to be in this new futuristic world that we are entering, that we've already entered. What's missing is friction. Friction, as I'm going to define it, is being exposed to real world feedback, to resistance. It's when the real world pushes back on you, when there's discomfort, when there's exposure. That doesn't happen in abstract digital systems. That doesn't happen with screens. And we think that's great. Look how easy life is getting. I mean, we're going to get to the point in not too long where we're going to have all kinds of robotic assistants. We won't have to do anything. But the less friction there is, remember, the less development there is, the more atrophy there is. So if we're smart, we're going to seek out friction. We're going to seek out feedback and pushback from the real world, in spite of the fact that these systems are optimized for us to not do that. They're optimized to handle everything. And we should let them handle easy, simple, automated, repetitive tasks. That's not the issue. That's wonderful. That is great for productivity. That will free us up to pursue more valuable things. But the more we give it permission, the more we give our volition over to these systems, and the more we let it do for us, the less friction that we're going to have, and the less development that we're going to have, and the greater likelihood of enclosure to where we are living in the matrix and our world is this conceptual digital interface. So I've been saying for a while now that the health crisis of the next decade is not going to be primarily about food or fitness. It's going to be about disconnection. Disconnection from our bodies, disconnection from each other, disconnection to the physical world. And this is so important. I mean, man is a connection and communication machine. Without that, what do we have? And in the world of AI, there's no actual connection. And there's no real communication. There's only mock-ups of it. So we can handle the chemicals in our food supply, and we should. But there's a different poison that we don't speak about, and it's what I'm discussing now. It's the gradual replacement of embodied life, of actual life, with enclosed symbolic versions of it. So, what I would suggest is that you now, don't wait, now start small and start working on creating and strengthening a relationship with your body to where you're really living in it. And there are various ways to do that. Get a massage, do it consistently. That's not a hardship. Get outside and walk. Pull yourself away from your screens. Hug someone, right? These are all things that are nice to do, but forget about nice, they're necessary. They're necessary in order to live an embodied life as opposed to the potential life that we're talking about now. Life in the matrix, where we're not living in the world, where we're not living and using our bodies. And with that, I shall say adieu. Thank you for being here. I will speak to you next week.